All right, here's our review lesson on federalism, the division of power between national and state levels. This is the chart that shows how federalism went through the time of our founding through now, and we'll reference these things as we go along. The basics of what federalism is supposed to look like according to Federalist 45 is this. The national government is designed to do major international things. The states are supposed to do everything that deals with the normal course of daily life for its citizens. The 10th Amendment reaffirms the principle of federalism and the idea that the national government should be limited in its power by saying any powers that aren't directly given to the national government should stay reserved to the states or the people. And so that was kind of the understanding for the first really 180 years of our founding, the idea that there would be dual federalism. The national government would be responsible for those certain sets of major national and international responsibilities. The states would make rules about the day-to-day lives of people for economic policy and business regulations and criminal law and police power. That was a term we had used earlier in the year, the power to make rules for your behavior. All that should be done at the state level. The commitment to dual federalism was so strong that southern states in particular believed they had a right to nullify or to simply not obey laws that they believed were in violation of the Constitution. And so you can see this chart here of things that were in that era of dual federalism, things that were national government powers, things that were responsibilities of the state and local governments. And then, of course, we have changes with industrialization and particularly with the New Deal. Congress tries to regulate things like businesses and child labor laws, but most of those laws were struck down in the early part of the 1900s. Of course, with the Great Depression and New Deal programs by FDR, we still see efforts by the national government to make sweeping changes to the economic lives of people and the country. But those laws now are things that are affirmed by the Supreme Court. They say that the national government does have the power to do those things under the Commerce Clause. And so that's one that I saw in a sample FRQ, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, the Commerce Clause, as one of the elements of the Constitution for required reading. Remember, Congress can regulate anything that relates to interstate trade, things like child labor, safety, unions, and even things like racial discrimination, all under the power of those things having effects on interstate commerce. And of course, the Necessary and Proper Clause plays a role in that. The national government can make any law that it wants to, that it thinks helps them carry out its constitutional responsibilities. So that works hand in hand with the Commerce Clause. Of course, the Supreme Court case McCollum versus Maryland was one such case. You got the details right here. This case was the first to establish the use of the Necessary and Proper Clause for things not specifically enumerated, as well as to affirm the supremacy of the national government when there's conflict. And of course, our other major required court case, U.S. v. Lopez, had finally decided that the Gun-Free School Zones Act was a step too far. Guns in schools didn't have anything to do with interstate commerce, and so they struck down that law, the first major limitation on Commerce Clause expansion in 50 years. The newer type of federalism is the one that emerged from the New Deal era, and it's cooperative federalism, the idea that the states and national government will work together to solve policy problems. There's a couple of ways that the national government has chosen to go about this. You've got on the left there things that are giving the national government more control, categorical grants, things where the states are told specifically how to use the money, like WIC, Women, Infants, and Children. That's the program that provides food for those groups. And they're told exactly who qualifies and how it will be spent. An example for education would be something like, here's money to spend on school technology. Whereas if you go over to the block grants, something that would give the states more control, there are fewer strings attached. You might just tell the states to spend that money on education. We have federal mandates, which give the national government more control. Those are directives by the national government. The Americans with Disabilities Act, Help America Vote Act, which required upgrading the voting technology, and the National Minimum Drinking Age Act. That was the one where Reagan said, raise your drinking age to 21 or we take away your highway funding. That also is things like incentives, things like tax credits to both money and businesses to achieve certain goals. The other area of control for the states would be the new federalism and devolution. Both of those just different eras or philosophies where we're going to return policymaking power to the states. The last part, Unit 1.9, deals with interaction amongst branches both at the national and state level. I just copied that thing. I think the COVID-19 situation is a great example of how the national and state